Go.
Comprehensible.
Yeah.
Chapter 13. The train was stalled on the bridge in a nicotine-fingered dawn. A cross-country crawler, its enigmatic insignium an imaginary bird with one bloody wing, or a mangled trespasser, centimetres athwart Steve Arthur's Lichfield to Longbridge commuter carrier. The delayed despots fidgeted, interrogated their cells, disbelieved galloping watches. Arthur's luxuriated in the delay. The viaduct itself was a fine example of Victoriana, but the true glory afforded by this unscheduled halt was the magnificently drear vista of South Birmingham's infernal abject in a band, an invalidated sector of geriatric commerce. 50,000 shades of grey coalesced into a dismal epitome of urban senescence. You could peroculate the Hubble telescope without finding a single item to interest the non-ironist. The recession was old news here. Capitalism had started satirising itself years ago. Oh, what a lovely class war. These were titanic porter cabins of warehoused air. The non-structures were emptied of jobs, pension machinery and wasted energy. Nobody bothered to loot the rotting pallets of pile-and-high plastic Twizzlers, unfeasible toys, flammable fakes. The retrenching bourgeoisie had scuttled back to the buy-to-let green zone. A consortium of enervated situationists, the Russ Trust, had assumed ownership of this discontinued win. They were mounting an anti-spectacle of systemic death. Banksy had installed a giant joke. There was no punchline. This shaggy dog story about the Englishman, the Irishman, the Scotsman and the job seekers' allowance would never end. It was all under control at the Job Centre's Applied Linguistics Department. Unemployment was an early opportunity to showcase your skill set. The compartment jerked awake, lunged into motion. It laboured into a disgruntled wilderness of insolvent yards and languishing plots. They dawdled under a stifling sky through a guilty landscape of absconding workshops, crept into the massive, ragged night of the centre's iron oxter, and were now approaching the subcutaneous infection of New Street. There was a planned redevelopment. Arthur's was against, of course. All second-hand public ugliness must be preserved. Everything new built was inexorably worse than everything old. The cold, dark innards of the station were fraught with unhappy endings. Even the filthy virgin invader deserved a less raddled sheath than this. You could feel the historic weight of routine frustration, vacation misery, and marriage-ending misconnections in the frowsy ducts and hostile spaces. Arthur's rode the elevator up to the remodelled tawdriness of the bullring. At this foolish hour the grilled shops were mute and yearning. Head-down clerks, cashiers and countermanners dodged the unhinged waltz of darting, school-bound pre-doles. He emerged into the hazy shambles of New Street. A genial East African con-man was flogging 2 a quid top-tat at the bottom of the rammed ramp. He hadn't been here long. He was still smiling. Arthur's joined a morose stub of bus-queue and rehearsed his spiel. He'd been chucked a dirty crust by the cancerous colon. A peremptory note had arrived yesterday. The atrocious pachyderm still wasn't answering his calls, summoning him to deliver an unnecessary lecture for international edu-dupes. The title was Business in Birmingham, Historical Perspective. According to Colon's missive, his audience would be mainly undergraduates, engineers, jewellers, systems analysts, and the level of English would be variable. £50 an hour, a 10-a-week course. He would swallow the insult for the time being and for the cash, but he had stowed in his soul's unforgiving freezer a venomous dish of revenge. Meanwhile, he had heard nothing from the police about the unreturned photocopy of the manuscript. They had evidently been blinded by the tinselly twinkle of a feeble star. A scuffle stage left curtailed his bitter reflections. A hapless neat was being restrained by a Home Office heavy, whose blackened exoskeleton bristled with torturer's tackle, manacles, taser, truncheon. Just calm down. But I haven't, and be quiet. We know who you are. You're being monitored. So that's where the manpower went. His ride arrived. He sat upstairs, the better to save the defiled remains of the eviscerated city. He parked himself across from a mother and daughter. The girl pressed a Teddy's ear to her stomach, instructed him to listen as she ate her burger. Her face was alive with the huge happiness of childhood. A couple of studenty individuals flopped down behind him. I'd never been on a bus till I came to uni. Best not to listen to the privileged young. They purchased obediently in the perpetual now of effectless retail hubs, consigned their bodies to the lucrative care of cacophonous clinic-bright fusion bistros and armies of placebo unguents, gulped down the anodyne euphoriance of branded rebellion, rinsed their ears daily dutifully with poisonous waters of winner worship and entitlement inflation, trained their contracted sympathies upwards each mercenary thoughtless ear to the emulation of on-message mediocrities. He rose above it, and literally, as the 33 climbed towards the raised, block-crenellated edge of the city's unpalatable palate. The pericentral belt skulked below a cold, hateful heaven. How he relished these delirious journeys into the heart of dullness, the tacit testimony of the drowsing canals, the unlettable acres of weed and wind, the thinned herds of hopeless shops, a tableau mourant of the law of falling profit. He kept a vigil over the corpse of the 20th century. Soon, too soon, they were at the northern annex of Heartlands University. The campus was a disheartening page of solid geometry, barely redeemed by the esoteric marginalia of an anarchistic alibi of aerosol authors. Let them eat cack. Where is England? Wear it on their face. A knot of youths disentangled itself and strung out towards a brutal sextet of aesthetic insults, between which the whirlpool of lecture levers posed an unconstruable problem in advanced chaos theory. He followed the signs to the Centre for Brand Studies. It was beyond Thatcher Tower, Learning to Lead, and the Murdoch Library. Little flocks of gracile, larking juveniles offset the visual violence. A skirmish of sparrows disputed the spoils of an upturned bin. He paused for breath beside a weeping wall. Moss was squatting in the fishnet PFI pointing. The token greenery, by contrast, had withered to a vestigial faggot of toxic twigs. Here it was, just past Human Resources and Choices, and opposite the Enron suite, the Branson building. He was in a foyer of world-class fifth-rateness, an interior design salon de refusés, curated by a blind torturer, the scowling paint, the round-sealed plywood doors, the shrilling phone in the deserted reception, the sinister smiling portraits, hierarchically arranged fossil strata of deans and dons, Don and Dean, John, Jean and Jean. Below this professorial canopy, an administrative understory of the Siefs and Latifs ignobly sprouted. Its broad leaves hosted and boasted a voracious colony of miscellaneous parasitoids, maintenance, public relations, human resources, finance, a monstrous bourgeois nomenclatura, a tiny universe of self-satisfaction, a mercenary army of cowards and quislings, the entire craven crew of cynical gifted polshiners, kicking clear of the heaving corral of cud-chewing corporatists. The carpet was a menagerie of acrylic animalculae. It had been sick on itself. Arrows and stick-figure escapers fled in all directions. Fermat had been in charge of numbering the rooms. He sat on a stunted chair, held his hammering head free of the oily overseat. Opposite was a glass case featuring the title pages of recent papers by department members. Financial preferences of ethnic minority managers in the UK. Research issues in building brand equity in the PC market. Enhancing emotional range in strategic visioning. A poster bleated a misshapen haiku. Heartlands University, specialising in success. A 42-inch screen advertised Mitchell & Butler's postgraduate diploma in multi-unit hospitality leadership. He stared in appalled fascination at a laminated rectangle of gibbermush. Identification of barriers to learning in a practice-based virtual learning environment. And what fresh hell was digital brand integration? Suffering Jesus, what a venue. His brain pan was ablaze with the ignominy of it. Oh well, think of the fiscal stimulus. Right, that's a chapter from Crimes of the Powerless by me, Frank Carney. It's supposed to be a comedy about the recession, based in a pub in Birmingham. Various characters drift in and out to no good effect in terms of their life destinies. And that chapter was about a failed academic who becomes embroiled in various shenanigans and crimes. And now my mate Will's going to ask me an intelligent question about the text.
Is there a Branson building? There really should be, shouldn't
Now, there isn't a Branson building, but most of the book is very, very thinly, you can't exaggerate something thinly, but marginally exaggerated versions of things I have seen in Birmingham. There isn't a Branson building, but I'm kind of feeling there might be in a few years' time.
I remember you saying to me back in the 80s that the recession really meant something in Birmingham.
Even before the recession, I said that.
Well, I think that was another recession.
Oh yeah, the mini recession.
I do remember going up and you warned me that I'd see factories laid to waste. So
that's when we had factories to be laid to waste.
Yeah. How long has this been coagulating in your brain?
Not very long, really. When I first met you, I tried something in Leicester. I never showed it to you because it was so pathetic. And it was a description of Leicester, and it quickly descended into a crime story, a bad one. I just gave it up after a few pages. And no, it hasn't been. It didn't brew in my mind at all. You know, I've never wanted to write anything. But do you remember a few years ago when you came over to Estonia? I had that horrible disease where you had to change my dressing on the back of my neck.
I've forgotten all about that.
That was the inspiration for it when you changed my dressing. Now I was sort of it was advanced hypochondria really, but it meant I was too embarrassed to go out because I had that stupid rash. So I'd read everything that was in the house, so I just started writing something. Obviously, Birmingham is underrepresented, you know, apart from in the film of Steptoe and Son. And Henry Green in the 30s wrote about Birmingham, so I thought I'd give it a go.
There's a lot in there about your dad as well, obviously.
Well, you know, I just looked after my dad, and he died of Alzheimer's and late onset diabetes, and it's comical, you know, watching watching someone disintegrate, and I think there's a lot of room for comedy in describing ugly people, fat people, people who are mentally disintegrating. And my dad was thin and quite handsome, but he was mentally disintegrating, and no, it's not a portrait of my dad at all. It just gave me a few ideas about. He said amusing things, and the book is just basically a set of amusing set pieces. I hope they're amusing anyway. It's not an investigation of Alzheimer's, really. I don't know enough about it.
It's resolutely unsentimental, isn't it? You've always managed to find humour in other people's misery. I think I should know that, if anybody.
Do you think it's unsentimental? Because I was worried it was a bit sentimental.
Well, there's sentiment and sentimentality, isn't there? I mean, it's incredibly moving in places, obviously.
That's very kind. I'm not very good at psychological depth, basically. I'm not. The weird thing, I don't know if you've done much extended writing. The weird thing is, you found out what you're very bad at very quickly, I think.
I'll have to try it.
Well, you've done a bit, you know. You've done surely. Or have you just been kidding me all these years?
Well, I wrote quite a lot when I was 7.
That was the last time. What I did was I wrote a chapter and I gave it to my brother and I gave it to you as well. And then I thought, well, the next chapter's got to be more or less the same, and I wanted a kind of unity in it. And the main